Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining. If you didn't know, I had a baby a few weeks ago, so I've spent some time away just being a mom, but I did have all of those pre-recorded episodes that I got a lot of feedback on, a lot of good feedback. Some of you sent me really long and thoughtful emails giving me not just feedback, but also thoughts for me to consider, other sides of the argument. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. The fact that you not only take the time to listen to the episode, but you also take the time to send me what you think about it and to help me consider a new perspective. That just is really significant to me. And so even if I haven't responded to your email, just know that I have seen it come through and I do plan to actually read it and to give the same kind of thought and consideration to my response that you gave to your original email. So thank you for that. This has been an awesome time just kind of soaking in life as a mom of a newborn. She was born on July 5th. I was really hoping for a July 4th baby, but she came at 11:55 on July 5th, and I'm going to talk about kind of my birth story. I'm not going to get into as much detail as probably some of you would like, but I am going to talk about the days and weeks leading up to it, what happened during my birth experience, and then the few weeks after. And of course, since this is Theological Monday, I am going to tie this into scripture. I'm going to tie this into what God's word says about what we as moms, I think, can learn from motherhood. Let me say, if you're not a mom yet, either you're planning to be a mom, you have no plans to be a mom, maybe you're a teenager in high school and this is just totally off your radar, or maybe you're a mom or a grandmother who has a lot more experience than I do, I still think that this episode is for you. I think that we can come together and all share in this kind of perspective of knowing what the gospel has to say about this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to talk about the things that I've learned. I'm not speaking as someone who has a ton of mothering experience. I just want to tell you personally what I have learned in these first few weeks. But thank you guys, first of all, for sticking through. While I have been away, I've kind of been unplugged over the past couple weeks. You've probably seen me get on Instagram stories and talk about some of the things that are going on in the news. But I've really tried to just enjoy this season of life. If there's one piece of advice that I've gotten, it's just enjoy it, because it's never going to be like this again. I'm never just going to have one child that's a newborn. I'm never going to have a first child again. My husband and I, before she was born, we really just kind of lived it up. We went and we got ice cream, or Andes. If you know what Andes is, it's frozen custard. We got Andes anytime we wanted to. We went out to eat anytime we wanted to. We had a few date nights, and we actually ended up having more date nights than we thought that we would, because I went past my due date. And so we really just, we just lived it up. And then since she was born, we've just kind of been okay with not doing anything outside of sitting at home and feeding her and watching TV. Of course, he had to go back to work. So we have tried to get as much out of the time as we can. But the main thing, or the main theme that I want to emphasize in this episode, or the main thing that I've really learned, is super simple. And it's that God is good, that his creation is amazing, and the designated order that he has ordained for human beings is purposeful, and it's perfect, and it is meant to show us something. It's not just something that we experience or that we go through. It's certainly not just about us. It's about something bigger than us, and I'm excited to kind of bring you guys into that. I have never experienced the beauty, and I don't mean to be cliche about this, but the beauty and the perfection of God's creation more than I have during pregnancy, during labor and delivery and all of that. I've never understood quite as poignantly why God does things the way that he does than I have when I was experiencing birth and becoming a mother. The first thing that I learned under this big umbrella of God being good and his creation being perfect and how he ordained things being just so flawless and fitting together in an amazing way, the first thing that I learned was surrender. I should not say was, I should say is. The first thing that I learned is surrender. This is something that I am not good at. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I have some kind of anxiety disorder, but I am an anxious person. And the reason why I'm an anxious person is because I really like control. I want to be in charge of things, whether or not I know where I'm going, whether or not I know what I'm doing. I feel more comfortable if I'm in charge. For example, I am not a good driver. I'm just not a good driver. My driving record can tell you that. I won't even go into that right now. But I feel more comfortable with me driving than someone else driving simply because I'm in control. So this idea of surrender that I inevitably learned through pregnancy and birth and all of that was a hard lesson for me to learn. I'm going to talk about how actually I learned it. I remember when I first found out that I was pregnant, I was so shocked and excited. I shouldn't have been that shocked because we had been trying for a few months, but we had kind of just decided at that point, okay, we're not really going to worry about it. We're not going to focus on it. We're not going to track anything. Whatever happens, happens. Well, it did end up happening at that point. So I was so shocked, but I also got this feeling, you know, when you get on a roller coaster and they put the fasteners down or the seat belts down, whatever it is, and the roller coaster starts going. That's like the scariest part of the roller coaster is when you realize that you can't get out. No matter what comes, no matter how scary it's going to be, you cannot get off this ride. And so that's how I felt after the shock and excitement kind of wore off. I mean, I was still very excited and happy about the whole thing, but you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get out of this. I don't know if I can do this. What if something happens? What if something's wrong with her? Oh my gosh, I was in a really hot bath a couple weeks ago. Did I do something to deform her? Can I go through birth? How bad is birth going to hurt? Is it really going to be that bad? How am I going to handle all this stuff? Am I going to be able to juggle work and relationships and all of this? You start worrying and you realize immediately that you have absolutely almost no control over what happens. Actually, I would say you completely have no control over what happens. And this was probably the first experience in my life that I really felt totally almost completely helpless. Like it was out of my hands. There was nothing I could do to stop it. There was nothing I could do to change it. Whatever was going to happen in this pregnancy, outside of me just being a responsible pregnant mother, whatever was going to happen in this pregnancy was going to happen, and there was really nothing that I could do about it. And in that moment, when I realized that, in a lot of moments after that, that I realized that all I can do really is take a deep breath and understand that God has preordained every second of this pregnancy, every second of labor and delivery. That helped me cope. That gave me a lot of peace. That helped me realize that surrender really is the best place to be when you're pregnant, or really when you're in any situation where you really don't know what's going to come. And I knew that that didn't mean that peace that I had. I knew that that didn't mean that nothing bad was going to happen. I knew very well that I could have a miscarriage, that something would go wrong in labor and delivery, but I had to remind myself in that, knowing that God was in control, knowing that surrender was a good place to be when you're in God. I had to remind myself that even in those potential difficulties, that they would be used for His glory and my good, because Romans 8:28 tells us that all things work together for the good of those who love Him. And that doesn't mean easy. Good doesn't necessarily mean neat. Good doesn't necessarily mean our version of good. But I knew that it meant His version of good. And if God is good, because He is, and if God is love, then whatever good that meant, even in difficulties, even in trial, even in hardship, whatever that pregnancy or birth would bring, that it would be okay. And so that's what I had to remind myself over and over again as an anxious person who always wants to be in control and who found herself completely out of control. I'm a hypochondriac. I just am. I was a hypochondriac before I was pregnant, when I was pregnant, and now that she's born. Anyone can tell you that. My mom can tell you that I really worry about germs and getting sick and all of that. So it has taken a lot of effort for me throughout this whole process not to freak out at every little thing. Now, God did graciously choose to give me a healthy pregnancy, and I'm so thankful for that, minus the 7,000 pounds that I gained mostly because of Chick-fil-A. Everything was really healthy. Everything went really well. I never had any complications, but every week for me during pregnancy, and it's not true for everyone, but for me, every week was another lesson in surrender. It's probably my least favorite lesson to learn, but I'm glad that I did. And by the end of the pregnancy, I felt like I had learned that. Like, okay, I'm at the end of this. I'm almost done being pregnant. I don't have to be anxious anymore. I don't have to wonder if the baby's okay. I can actually see her. I can hold her. I can know that she's doing fine. When she's in the womb, you kind of feel like it's this whole mystery. Like, you never really know. Is she alive? She hasn't moved in 30 minutes. Is everything fine? So I thought, okay, I've surrendered enough. My anxiety is going to go away once I actually give birth, it's fine. But the big hurdle, as I realized the closer that I got to 40 weeks, the big hurdle that I still had to get over was birth. And y'all, I was really scared of birth. The closer that I got to my due date, the more scared I was. I mean, I was constantly praying that everything would be okay. I don't really know why I was so scared of it or what scenario I was really picturing. I guess I had just heard horror stories. You know that bad things can happen during birth. I didn't want anything to happen to her, especially I didn't want anything to happen to me. So I was just scared. I was praying all of the time. I was asking my husband to pray. I was talking to my husband about it. I was asking my parents to pray, my friends to pray. I was asking everyone to pray that I would have peace, that everything would go okay. Because even knowing that God is in control and even being in that place where you know you have to surrender, we're still commanded to pray. It's that verse in Philippians 4, I think, that says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And then we're promised that the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will be with us. It will guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. So that's what I did. I just laid those requests down and I said, okay, I have no idea what's to come. I have no idea what birth is going to be like. But I need to be carried through it because I am freaking out. And I really was freaking out. I probably didn't talk about that quite as much as I could have on my podcast because I didn't want y'all to think that I was, that I wasn't in a good place. I didn't want to freak anyone else out. And I don't want to freak anyone else out that's pregnant right now because you shouldn't be freaking out. But I was freaking out and I was trying my best to have peace. And I would just pray that, okay, God, I'm anxious about birth. I don't know what to expect. Just be with us. Give me peace. Protect her, protect me, pray that everything would go okay, and help me trust you. I had to pray that like every hour leading up to birth, because I still felt completely helpless. I still felt totally vulnerable and like I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I took the birth class. I did all of my research. I had my birth plan. I had a doula. I have an awesome supportive husband. I have family that's going to be there. I really like my doctor. I know that I was going to be in the best hospital, one of the best hospitals in the state. And I still was really worried and I still was really scared. And I'm not going to get into my whole birth story because quite frankly, there's just a lot of sanctimony and judgment in the mothering community online about birth. And I know you guys aren't like that, but I'm just not comfortable getting into everything that led up to my birth because there's a lot of things that I probably could have done differently. There's a lot of things that I probably could have asked, could have said, could have advocated for myself, but I don't really know. At the end of the day, on July 5th at 11:55, before 11:55, I ended up having a C-section. I was 40 weeks, 5 days. That was an outcome that I never, ever entertained. Like, I just never thought that I would end up in a C-section. I mean, talk about surrender. You can't do anything when you have a C-section. I mean, you're numb from the waist down. They put your arms like outstretched by your sides. I mean, you can't see anything until they take down the curtain. That was not at all what I wanted. Like I said, I had a birth plan, and my birth plan was to do everything naturally. I didn't even want an epidural. I knew mind over matter. I was going to be able to do it. Possibly. I knew that there was a possibility that I would have to have an epidural, but I never thought that I would have to have the interventions that I had. I never thought that I would end up in a C-section. I mean, talk about being out of control. As someone who likes control as much as I do, I have never been further out of my comfort zone. I mean, I don't want to go through the whole thing, but before going in, I am like sobbing, crying. I'm uncontrollably shaking. All my family around me is crying. It was a very emotional, it was the hardest and best day of my life, I would say. Best day of my life because I met my baby girl. She was healthy, 7 pounds, 10 ounces, just a perfect little ball of perfection. She was great and everything was healthy and I've recovered great. So I don't want it to seem like I'm complaining. It was just scary and not at all what I planned. And I was frustrated too because I prayed so hard for a natural birth, not just for the birth to go okay, but I prayed for a natural birth. And you might think it's crazy, Allie, everything, went well. How can you possibly say that it didn't, if everyone ended up healthy. And it did. And I want to reiterate that I'm so thankful that everyone ended up healthy. I'm so thankful for modern medicine and for doctors and for hospitals and for all of that. I'm so thankful for my baby girl. But it just was, all I'm saying is that it was another lesson for me in surrender. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for my husband, who was there literally keeping me sane. But in those moments when I was laying there on the operating table, you can't feel anything. The curtain was still up and I'm still crying, still freaking out. The one thing that I remember most out of all of that pain and all of that scariness and all of that fear and anxiety that I had, the one thing that I remember most is I remember hearing my doctor, whom I love, my doctor going, "Hi." And when he said, because they had been talking, like the doctor and the nurse, whoever was cutting my stomach open had been talking. And then I heard him go, "Hi." And then all of a sudden there was this pause and this huge scream. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And they lowered the curtain and I looked over, and it's just kind of crazy. You look at your baby and you don't look at the fact that your stomach is literally sliced open and it looks like your insides are going to come out. You just like look up and you look at your baby, and I just remember he was holding her up and she was screaming, and her hair, she has a full head of hair. Her hair was sticking everywhere and she just looked like this chunky little butterball of goodness. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened." And then it's still not over. Unfortunately, I didn't get to hold her right away. She had some oxygen issues, so they had to put her on this table. And I'm just like in this daze, looking at her, not able to believe what just happened. But when they put the baby on your chest, that's when everything changes. Yes, when you look them in the eye and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is a little tiny human that we created that has been inside me for the past 10 months. And oh my gosh, I can't believe they're here, they're healthy, and they're alive, and they're crying, and all of the things that you want." But when they lay that child on your chest, that's when everything changes. That is when there's just this seismic shift that happens, when everything that you thought was important in the world just kind of fades. Everything that you thought was important, everything that you thought was so major and such a big deal that you had anxiety about, it just kind of gets small. And it's just a visceral feeling that you have. You know without a shadow of a doubt that you would do anything for this child. As terrible as the previous 24 hours were before I had her, I would do it an infinite number of times to hear my doctor say "hi" to my baby again and see her face and to have them lay her on my chest. It is the craziest feeling. You know that you would do anything for them. You would lay down your life for them. And what struck me in that moment is that God created that for a purpose, that God created that natural inclination that all of us have to feel that way. He designed us so that we are almost desperately inclined to care for our children. And you feel that immediately as soon as they're born. I mean, it's really a love that I don't think exists outside of parenthood, or at least I didn't experience this kind of love outside of parenthood. And that's not to say that there aren't other kinds of special and awesome and wonderful kinds of love in other stages of life, because of course there are, but I think this is unique. It's like this huge tidal wave just hits you and you're like, "Oh, okay, so this is what my parents were talking about when they said that they loved me." And then on an even bigger scale, you're like, "Oh, so this is kind of a fraction, just a glimpse of what God means when he says he loves us as his children. And oh my gosh, how much did he have to love us to send his own son to die for us?" It's really hard, I think, to really understand, or at least it was hard for me to understand what that meant. And I didn't even realize it was hard for me to understand what that meant until I had a child of my own, and you were just kind of like overtaken by what I would say is almost a painful love. Like it's almost a painful love that you have for your kids, and you don't really understand. I didn't really understand what love was. I don't think it's cliche as it sounds until I had my daughter, not even when I was pregnant. It's just a whole other ball game. So that's the second thing that I learned and am learning in addition to surrender is love. This kind of profound and unconditional and heartbreaking love that you just don't know. You just don't know before you're a mom or a dad. And I'm not saying that it's always going to feel easy or it's always going to feel like rainbows and butterflies. I know that it's not, but the love that you have for your children, which is a tiny fraction of God's love for us, it persists through all of that. And it emphasized something, and this is where I'm going to kind of get off on a tangent that doesn't really have to do with motherhood, but it emphasized something that I already knew and that we've talked about so much on this podcast, something I've thought about so much in the past few weeks, is this absolute garbage message that we hear from culture and society of self-love and self-care that we are constantly obsessing over. Now, I'm not advocating for self-loathing and self-deprecation. You guys know that. But the fixation that our culture has right now on loving ourselves, on doing what we want all the time, is nothing more than what I call trendy narcissism. It's really no more than that. It is flimsy. It is fake. It is fleeting. It doesn't satisfy. And you see and you feel immediately just how empty and unfulfilling that is when you are met with the kind of love that you have for your child or even for your spouse, that kind of sacrificial love. I do very little of what I want right now. Any of you who are parents understand that. I have very little me time, and I look back at my pregnancy self and I realize how not busy I was compared to everything that I have now. And I would not trade it for the world. Every time I need to do anything, even if it's read my Bible or eat or take a shower, whatever it is, there is always something in someone else that needs my attention. Always. And I haven't had that before, but I wouldn't trade it. I would not trade it for the world. I would not trade the sleepless nights, the diapers, the total lack of free time. I wouldn't trade it for the world, which means that I'm so uninterested in the pithy self-love, self-care, self-empowerment mantra given to me by Instagram influencers. Like, if it wasn't unattractive to me before, it is so unattractive to me now. It just doesn't even hold a candle to the kind of love that you have in real life for someone else. There is joy in service. There is joy in self-sacrificial love. But the self-love that is offered by the world, that is constantly encouraged by the world, is going to end in misery. And I'm just going to keep on going on this tangent for a second. So here's what the people propagating the self-love gospel don't know, and apparently don't want you to know, that sacrificial love is so much better than self-love. Sacrificial love is so much better than self-love. And right now we're just talking about like earthly sacrificial love. We're not even talking about, Christian and Christ-like sacrificial love yet. But the kind of love that manifests itself in putting others before yourself is so much more gratifying, is so much more fulfilling, is so much more satisfying than the kind of love that only thinks about yourself. And now you might be thinking, if you are not a listener of this podcast or a regular listener of this podcast, you might be thinking, Allie, are these things mutually exclusive? Are they really mutually exclusive? Can't you love yourself and love other people? Why do you have to choose one over the other? And the answer is this, and it's something that we have talked about many times. The Christian is not called to self-love. Ever. Not once in the Bible. Like, the Bible is radically unconcerned with people loving themselves. And why is that? The answer is in Leviticus 19:18, a verse that all of you know. Love your neighbor as yourself. The answer is because we already do love ourselves. Loving ourselves is human nature. And if you don't believe me, I can explain that. So first, let me say that it is a lie from the pit of hell to interpret that verse, love your neighbor as yourself, as you can't love your neighbor until you love yourself, or you love your neighbor as long as you love yourself. That is deceit from Satan himself. We are born loving ourselves. That does not mean that we think that we're awesome and that we're beautiful all the time. It means that we are born looking out for ourselves. This is why we have to teach toddlers to share. We never have to teach toddlers to keep things for themselves. It takes effort to sacrifice for others. It takes effort to see the best in others. It takes effort for us to lay aside what we want for the sake of what someone else wants or needs. It takes no effort It takes no effort at all for us to look after ourselves, to make excuses for ourselves, to see the best in ourselves, to do exactly what we want. We are naturally very concerned with ourselves and what we want. Ephesians 5:28 through 29 says this: "In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it as Christ does the church." So sure, we think negative thoughts about ourselves. Of course, sometimes we're unhappy with how we look. Maybe we don't like our appearance or something like that. There are people who feel like they hate themselves so much that they slide into depression or they're driven to suicide. But even in the tragic case of something like suicide, that person is still in a dark way looking out for themselves. They are looking to escape pain and escape despair. And here is where Christ comes in. For these people, for all of us who have these self-deprecating thoughts, who are negative about our own abilities or appearance or whatever, the answer for our insecurity, the answer for our despair is not more self-love. It's not. It is God's love. That is the answer the Bible gives us for our anxiousness, for our heaviness. It is not self-love or self-care. It is God's love and God's provision for us. It is not in thinking of ourselves more that we will become more at peace. It is taking our eyes off of ourselves and fixing our gaze on Christ that we will have peace. So if you are someone who struggles with defeating thoughts, if you are someone who feels like you just can't get ahead, or you just don't trust your abilities, whatever it is, you will accomplish nothing by telling yourself how awesome you are. I promise you that. You will feel good for a few weeks. You might feel good for even a few months. And then the self-deprecation is going to come back, and then you're going to get in that self-defeating cycle again. My advice to you is not to love yourself more, but to take your eyes off of yourself and look to the cross. If you want to know confidence, consider that you, a sinner, get to approach the holy God of the universe with boldness because of Christ. If you want security, consider that in Christ, you are eternally a child and an heir and a saint, and there is nothing that you can do to change that. Not because you're faithful, but because God is faithful. So the answer to our anxiety, the answer to our insecurity and the negative thoughts about ourselves is not found in us. It is found in Christ. And if you keep looking to yourself and you keep looking to your ability to love yourself for satisfaction, you are going to end up disappointed. I promise you that. I have learned that yet again. I knew that before, but I feel like I've learned that in a very tangible and profound way through mothering my daughter. I've been reminded yet again that the world just has absolutely nothing to offer us when it comes to satisfaction. Like, the things that it offers are just so untrustworthy and are just so fleeting. It tries to offer very cheap substitutes for joy and for peace and for satisfaction, and they just come up short. God, on the other hand, shows us real love. He shows us sacrificial love through Christ, and then tells us to love him and to love others in a sacrificial way as well. There's a reason why Jesus calls his disciples to self-denial and never once calls them to self-love. He never calls his disciples to self-love. When it comes to understanding human nature, I'm probably going to go with Jesus, with the creator of the universe, rather than some Instagram influencer who just created her account 5 minutes ago. So surrender and sacrificial love, I would say that those are the two things that I've learned and am continuing to learn as a mom. It is true what they say, that having a child is sanctifying. It is extremely sanctifying. So is getting married, but this kind of like takes it to the next level. You're stripped of yourself, and amazingly, somehow you find yourself actually wanting to do this again. And I just think that God made us this way, that he does this to remind us of the gospel, of his love for us, of his love for his son that he sent to die for us, and our need to love and to be loved deeply. Recovery from all of this, just the physical recovery from the C-section, has not been easy. Thankfully, everything went well for us. I've recovered well. My child is healthy, but I am still in pain. I've only just now gotten the go ahead to start working out again. I still can't move in the same way that I could before. Those few days after getting a C-section, those of you who have had a C-section know, they were the hardest days of my life. But recovering from the C-section taught me something else, and it taught me empathy. So there were two groups of people that I thought about when I was recovering from my C-section, and you're just so tired, you're so worn out, you're in pain, all of this. I thought about single moms who don't have anyone next to them to help them and to support them and to hold their baby and to help change that. Hats off to you. I cannot imagine what this would have been like if I hadn't had my husband. I just can't imagine it. Doing that alone. I mean, my husband was basically taking care of me and our child for like the first 2 weeks after she was born. I cannot imagine doing this by myself. And even the two of us felt like we couldn't handle it sometimes. And so my mom has been a huge help. I can't imagine doing this by myself. So I've just thought about and prayed for so many times over the past few weeks, single moms. And we as Christians, it made me think about what I have done for single moms. Have I stepped up? Have I helped single moms who are in this position? Have I even looked for opportunities to help them? I don't think I have as much as I should have. There are probably single moms all around me who are going through the same thing that I went through. And I do have an opportunity, you have an opportunity, we all do, to be there for them. I mean, this is one of the most vulnerable, the hardest, the most trying and exhausting times of your life. Doing this by yourself, you've got to feel sometimes like you just want to give up. And so that's an area that I've not just thought about, but I want to change my behavior in. And how can I help these women and support them? I don't know what I would have done without my support. And I just hope that we can, I mean, a lot of you probably have already done a good job in this, but we can do an even better job in helping these women. And the second set of people that I thought about were people who are sick, who have chronic pain. I was in a lot of pain after my C-section. And I just thought about what it would be like to know that your pain isn't going to go away, that it's just going to be managed, that you're not necessarily going to be healed, and how hard that must be. And I've never gone through something like that. I don't have a family member really that's gone through something like that. So I just thought about all the people that are in and out of hospitals all the time because they're sick or they are at home dealing with some kind of pain and they don't know if they're going to be healed. I thought about you guys and I prayed for you guys as well. Going through something like this and having an experience that you've never had before, it gives you a new perspective on what other people are going through. And it also makes you extremely grateful for what you have. It gives you perspective too, to realize that, okay, even though I'm going through something really hard, I don't have it as hard as other people. And that does change your attitude, I think. So the other thing that I learned was empathy. And then the last thing that I learned, well, there's a lot that I learned. The last thing that I learned, I would say, is gratitude. The first couple weeks, like I said, after a C-section with a newborn, not easy. Granted, this is our first, so we also don't have like a toddler running around. I can imagine that makes it that much harder. But you need help. Like, this is a huge adjustment. So I'm just giving advice to those of you who are about to have a baby. Accept help. Like, my mom has been so helpful to us. She is really the only person right now besides my husband that I totally feel like I trust her completely. When she has my baby, I feel like I can just kind of, do what I need to do and I'm not worried or anxious about it. So accept help. And this is another piece of advice too. Well, actually, before I get to that, if you don't have community, having community. If you don't have community, I would suggest that you try to plug in as much as you can to the people around you. And like I said, accept their help. For example, like we accepted meals from our Sunday school class, from people in our church, from our neighbors. There have been lots of people in my family who have been really helpful. And that is not natural to me. I actually don't like plugging in and asking for help. I don't like expecting things from people. It makes me uncomfortable for some reason. I don't like to put people out. I don't like to wonder if people are putting too much effort in that they don't actually want to put in. So again, my advice to you is to just accept that, because in the same way that you probably feel joy when you're serving someone, so do other people. And here's my other piece of advice. If you have people in your life that you maybe are expecting to help you, but don't end up helping you, just understand that you are going to have to give people grace and be patient with people in the same way that you would want them to give grace and be patient with you, because there are going to be people that you expect to help and that you want to be there for you, and who you just anticipate are going to step up to the plate who don't. There are just some people who don't know what you're going through, and so they don't offer help. There are going to be people that you don't expect at all to be there for you who are. So try not to get your feelings hurt during this time. Try not to be disappointed. Try to just accept help when it comes, and to be grateful and to be gracious when you can, because with all of the hormones and the craziness that's going on after you give birth, the best thing that you can do is to just relax and be grateful for what you have and not build any resentment against people who don't give you what you think that you need or deserve. So those are the biggest things that I learned. Surrender, sacrificial love, empathy, and gratitude. These are things Christ is teaching me in motherhood so far. There's no question motherhood is hard, but let me just say, as a first-time mom, but also as someone who knows people who have way more kids than I do, who knows moms with special needs kids, who knows moms whose lives as mothers have been really trying, it is worth it. So if you are about to have a baby, or if you are thinking about having a baby one day, don't be freaked out by all of the stories of people that tell you that it's really hard. It is hard, but I'm so excited for you. Ever since I've had a baby, every pregnant woman that I know, I'm like, I'm so excited for you. This is the best thing ever. Yes, you don't get a lot of sleep and it's really hard and it's a big adjustment, but it's the best thing ever. Like, I am so excited for moms, and I want that to be more, and I'm not trying to be, self-righteous or have any sanctimony or anything like that, because, I only have one child. I'm not that experienced, but I just wish I saw more excitement and joy and positivity about motherhood in public and online than I do. I talked about this on Instagram the other day. It's become very trendy to talk about how terrible our kids are, and to talk about how hard it is, how they're driving us to drinking, how we can't wait for them to go back to school. And look, I'm not saying that motherhood isn't exhausting and that we shouldn't be vulnerable and honest, because I think that's fine. But it seems like it's gotten trendy to exaggerate hardship for the sake of attention on social media. And if we think that that's not contributing to our kids growing up to be bullies because we're bullying them behind our backs, but also the abortion culture, we're crazy. Like, if we are constantly talking about how terrible parenthood is, I heard someone say people act like they're victims of parenthood. That's so true. If we think that that's not contributing to abortion culture, then we are crazy. There's also this weird trend among young people, like millennials and younger people, to be really mean about babies, to talk about how, babies suck, or make fun of babies, or do pranks towards babies in public and then video it and put it online. It's not funny, and it contributes to this terrible mentality that kids can be dehumanized, that they can be objectified, that they're really just used for our entertainment, that they can be bullied. And we as Christians really need to take a step back and to make sure that we are not playing into that. Again, I'm not saying that we should only be posting about the good things and only be posting about our lives being perfect, but we need to be careful about how we portray our kids and portray motherhood online, and that our perspective actually aligns with the Bible. Because if we ask ourselves, is God really glorified from us talking badly about our kids online? Is God really glorified from us, some people, exaggerating their hardship for the sake of attention? Is God really glorified from us having this bad, mean-spirited attitude towards kids and babies? I mean, that's the same God who made these kids, first of all, who also said that children are an inheritance from the Lord, who also said that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, that they are knit together in their mother's womb. It's the same God who said, let the children come to me. So I can probably rest assured that God is not glorified from by our negativity towards children. So I want to tell you, for any of you who are maybe scared, maybe you've been affected by this negative culture about kids and child rearing and babies and all of that, that it's a lie. Having kids, at least, in my little experience, but I promise you I will believe this forever, having kids is awesome. I'm sure it's hard at many stages, but it is awesome. It is worth it. I'm a little bit worried about our generation not having enough kids, not because we don't have enough children to perpetuate the world, but because we don't have enough parents. There is a new set of There's just a new stage of love and sacrifice and empathy that you gain when you are a parent, and I think the world is better for it. So you have a lot to look forward to. Thank you to all of you who are moms, who are grandmothers. Thank you for keeping humans alive and for doing your best to raise responsible adults. Thank you so much. I only have a glimpse of everything that you've experienced. So this has been my mothering experience so far. I will keep you guys updated on either on Friday or next week. We're going to talk about deconversion. We're going to talk about the Hillsong singer. We're also going to talk about Joshua Harris, and I'll do a deep dive into all of that. But I just wanted to kind of give you everything that I've been thinking. There's actually a lot more that I've been thinking about motherhood that I'll probably share with you guys on Instagram stories or whatever. But thank you guys for listening. I'm so glad to be back. I missed you. It feels like I have been away from my really good friend for a long time, and we've only been texting here and there, but we actually still have a lot to catch up on. That's how I feel. So thank you guys for sticking with me. Let me know what you think about this podcast. You can email me, Allie at theconservativemillennialblog.com. Leave a 5-star review if you love the podcast, and I will see you guys on Wednesday.